everybody. I am so honored to get to be here with the amazing, talented cast and director of CODA, which I'm still crying and singing both sides now for the last several days. So it's a joy to get to talk about this movie. But for clarity issues, I wanted to bring up that we have the fantastic Heather Rossi voicing for Daniel Durant. We have Jack Jason voicing for the fantabulous Marlee Matlin, and we have Josh Steckel voicing for Troy Kotzer. So the first question is for Sian. What was the motivation for you to tell this particular story?
Well, I was approached after I was at Sundance with my film Tallulah. I went in to meet with the producers, and Philippe Rousselet and his company Vendôme had produced the French film La Famille Bellier, and they were looking to do an American remake. And Patrick Washburger was on board to produce that. And so they sent me the film, and I watched it, and I felt like the original film had a lot of heart. It was very moving, and there was just something at the core of it, and the idea of a CODA experience. I think the experience of being between these two worlds, of the hearing world and the deaf world, that was very exciting to me in the story, and also that there was possibility to expand the story and to go deeper and to really dig out these characters in a meaningful way and dig out this family. And so I was excited that they were open to find a filmmaker and be able to take the premise and then let me go and make my own movie completely.
Well, for Emilia, since you are the star of this movie, did you have prior experience with deaf culture before embarking on this?
No, I really didn't. It's always been something that has fascinated me and that I've wanted to know more about. But before CODA, I didn't know any ASL. I didn't know anything about deaf culture or the deaf community. So I was so grateful when I found out that I got this role, that I was going to be able to learn so much more about the culture and the language. And I absolutely adored it. I fell in love with ASL, and I'm so grateful for Daniel, Troy, Marlee, and Anne, and Alexandra, and everybody that helped me through this process and made me fall in love with the language.
Can you talk a little bit about where you started with the research process and getting into Ruby's skin?
So I started with ASL lessons. I worked for 9 months prior to shooting. Then I'd never had a singing lesson either before CODA, so I also was doing singing lessons. And then when I got to Gloucester, I talked with Sian a lot, and we worked very hard together on Ruby's character, and we talked to coders. We went out on the boat. Troy, Daniel, Sian, and we all went fishing, which was also a new skill that we were all learning. So kind of before filming, it was a lot of learning all these new skills and training very hard. And then on set is really when Sian and I kind of created Ruby, and she kind of came alive. But she was a joy to play. I don't think roles like Ruby come along very often, so I'm so grateful that Sian gave me this opportunity.
When I know that Paul Raci from Sound of Metal has talked extensively about codas and the different feelings they have about being a conduit between what he calls the hearing world and the deaf world. Sian, what elements of being that bridge did you want to make sure that you captured with the story?
I think it was interesting because, when I was writing the script, it was important to me that Ruby, it wasn't just a story of like that Ruby's parents relied on her. Ruby, being a CODA, created an incredible sense of self for her. I think when you look at enmeshed relationships, or that she, when I spoke with a lot of CODAs, there was really a feeling of feeling very important at a young age. Yes, you are thrust into situations where maybe you have to interpret, but you also have a lot of control, and you feel a lot of sort of pride in that role and being that person. And so Emilia and I really talked about her reluctance to leave she might be saying, well, it's about my parents and I can't leave them and, you know, they need me. The reality is she's afraid to leave. She's afraid that she might not know who she is once she steps out of that role. And I think there's a scene in the film on the beach with Leo and Ruby, and it's a very important scene in the film to me because it's Ruby saying, you know, well, I can't go, you know, you need me. And Leo really calls her out and says, you know, this is you. Like, we were fine before you, we will be fine after you, go. And that scene was really important to me because yes, we were looking at a specific dynamic that was created in this particular family with their CODA daughter, but there's also a generational thing where Leo is looking at his parents and going, guys, stop. Like, I can do this. I can be the person that you know, interfaces with the hearing world. He's very comfortable doing that, whereas I think Jackie and Frank are not. So, you know, part of the experience I think that Emilia and I were trying to capture is her own fear about letting go of that identity and worrying that, you know, who am I if I step out of this? And Ruby's much more confident when she's at home in her deaf world than she is in the hearing world. You know, we talked about how school doesn't feel right to her. And a lot of CODAs I spoke with, you know, feel more culturally deaf than they do hearing because ASL is their first language. It's how they know how to express themselves. And I think there's a sort of displacement within the hearing world that sometimes can be a hurdle to overcome.
Well, for Marlee, I know that your Oscar-winning performance as Sarah in Children of a Lesser God was many audiences' first look at deafness as portrayed by a deaf actress. Did you see commonalities to that role in playing Jackie, and how did you want to approach your character?
Jackie, Jackie in CODA and Sarah in Norman and Children of the Lesser God are, I think, completely different people. Sarah was a woman who basically was stuck in a place where she grew up and ended up working at the school as a cleaning woman. And she was angry and she just, and yet, well, whereas Jackie was more independent. I mean, she would speak her mind probably more often, and she was a mother. She was responsible for taking care of her family to make sure that they took care of their business together. The one thing that I think of that Jackie and Sarah have in common, and this is actually the first time that anyone has asked this question, and I'm glad you did, Kristen, was that they both, perhaps in their backgrounds, their families, had no communication with the hearing people in their families. They might have been the only deaf people in their families. And so I think if, talking about approaching Jackie and Sarah were two different ways, and having to deal with Ruby, of course, was, I think Jackie realized, okay, my daughter has her own identity. I have to let her go. And yet at the same time, I need to be able to share with my daughter about my background, having to do with my mother, having to be the beauty queen and having everyone compliment me, but trying to break free from that. And Ruby wanted to make her own decision, wanting to do what she loved to do, go to college, be a singer, and having to learn to let go. So I think that both of us, it was a learning experience for mother and daughter, and learning about my daughter's singing passion and wanting to go on beyond the family.
You've been very outspoken about the need for more disabled voices in entertainment. How can we make space in the industry for everyone's perspective to be given a platform?
We have to continue to speak out with anyone who's willing to listen to us. We have a beautiful and vibrant deaf community out there, and disabled community. Each community has its beauties and its strength, and we are part of the diversity conversation that's happening today. We have to make people understand that. And I continue, and I have been doing for the last 35 years, to develop projects, to network with people, to to not just sit back, but rather collaborate and include both deaf and hearing communities together, and deal with the powerhouses in Hollywood. And I guess it's just difficult, but it is doable. It is doable, and hopefully this film will open people's eyes to say, yes, you can develop stories that happen to have deaf characters in them. And you can tell more stories that don't have to do only about being deaf. It's just it's as simple as that.
You make it sound so easy, Marlee. It sounds so simple when you put it together, and I know apparently it's still a work in progress. For Eugenio, you know, we've seen many actors.
Oh, wait, listen, I want you to understand, we're not stopping here with this film. We're not going to stop with this.
Oh, definitely, definitely. For Eugenio, I wanted to ask, we've seen so many actors portray sympathetic teachers that deal with complicated teens on the road to success. Did you draw on any past performances? How did you want to set this character up as your own?
We wanted to portray a different kind of teacher, not the classic teacher that wants to help the pupil. I felt that I needed to portray this this guy that is so into his job. He really loves what he's doing. He takes this very serious, in a very, very serious way. So he doesn't like to waste his time. And when he meets Ruby, he's excited. I remember that when I was very young, I wanted to come to the US. And so my mom said, well, you need to start taking some lessons. And I started taking some dancing lessons. And for some reason, I ended up taking ballet. And I was like, I don't need ballet, Mom. I just want to go to the US and work there. And they were like, yeah, but you need to study, prepare. And so I met this teacher that she was so mean, but she was mean because she loved me. She wanted me to succeed. And she was really, really hard on me. And there was a moment where I remember I hated her. So when I was trying to portray this character, I remember her. She was really mean, but that she was very straightforward, and she was not subtle at all. She just wanted me to succeed, and she was really hard and tough. And that's what I wanted to put in my character, that love, that it looks like he hates her, but he's not. He actually respects her very much, and that's what he's so mean to her.
Does the ballet training come in handy since recently? Now I just need to know about the ballet work that you were doing.
Well, you know what? I loved so much dancing. By then, I
want to see some moves. Come on.
I didn't dance not even in a party back then. And all of a sudden, I started taking like 8 hours a day from Monday through Saturday. And there was one day I ended up dancing at the National Ballet. It was amazing. And then my teacher, she passed away really quick. I mean, 3 years after I met her, she died. So I had to go back to acting. But I was really into ballet. I was good.
Had I known, I would have written this into the character.
Right? I was saying, how are we only hearing about this now?
A whole ballet sequence. Like, you need to reveal these things.
That would have been awesome.
Next
he would
feature.
Have been meditating. He would have been doing
CODA,
ballet.
CODA 2,
CODA
the ballet
2, yes.
of Eugenio.
Teaching the deaf family to dance.
I would love to see Troye with the legs,
yeah.
You know, how do you say that? Las mallas.
Yeah, the pirouettes and a lot of pas de deux. I would have loved to see that.
We'll change the title, or let's change the topic maybe.
Well, Troye, I remember when you did the Mandalorian and the conversations that came about from your appearance in that. How do you hope people look at your character Frank and his complications and his humor and all of that?
It was so fun for me to play, this just person with a very complex character, and then with the Mandalorian and Star Wars, it had its own culture. And then we were kind of limited. It was more gestural in how we communicated for the Tusken Raiders. But with this character, my face was shown, and I was out there, but it was interesting to explore a different character. It was fun for me to play around and to experience different characters. That's always fun to do. Right, Daniel and Marlee?
Yes,
I'm a huge
absolutely.
fan-
And
huge-
Eugenio,
I'm
Emilia,
a
especially.
huge fan of Troy's work, and particularly watching him on stage, being able to play the variety of characters that he's had to play. It's just mind blowing. Every time I've seen Troy on stage or in films, I've been a big, well, Daniel too. I mean, listen, this is a big fan fest here. So
Well, thank you.
Yeah. And this is Daniel. I remember back, when I was going to a Deaf West production and I thought Troy was going to be in it, and I saw Troy's acting and I was just so taken aback. He completely becomes his character. And then all of a sudden he's Troy again. And when he's on stage, he is 100% this character, and you feel convinced that he is that person. And I've learned so much from him. It's been such an honor.
Thank you, Daniel.
I will say,
I had a great teacher too. So
I saw Troy in two Deaf West productions before I cast him. And I would absolutely back Daniel up. He disappears into a character, because I remember I had seen him in this play. I think it was an Edward Albee play. And he was this like professor, this intellectual who was sort of neurotic, and it was just not Frank, and when I knew he was coming into audition, I remember being like, oh, that guy, I know his work. And then the moment he walked in the door, he was Frank. He had completely embodied this Gloucester fisherman, and just was out. There was no one else that I could cast after I saw Troy. He was like the guy walked into the room, and my casting directors and we all looked around after he left the room, and we were like, well, that's him. Like, that's Frank. There's nobody else. So I'm in awe of all of you, truly. Like, I think it's a magical experience when you get to direct actors that are so committed and work so hard. And, everyone had to learn new skills for this movie, but really lived as these characters.
Well, and also for Troy, I wanted to ask, how do you use your creativity, your platform, your voice to amplify issues and causes that are important to you?
wow. Nobody will take my deafness away. That's part of who I am. And I've, learning to adapt, that first day that we were shooting and I met the crew for the first time, I wasn't really sure how it was all going to work out. But after weeks, we became a family. We bonded, and it was amazing. It's like if you joined a football team from a different school, and but then you become part of that team, and that we just all work together.
Well, this question I wanted to throw out to Daniel, but Troy and Marlee, feel free to answer as well. This story is about a family that is predominantly deaf, but they are also just a family. Do you think that the lack of good representation in the past of the deaf community really does help or hinder as we're seeing that integration of people who are deaf into their communities, as we see the family struggle with losing Ruby?
Yeah, and this film really shows it shows the deaf family, right? There, it shows their culture, and it shows what we look like every day and how we live, how we communicate with each other, and how we get each other's attention. It shows our culture. And also a little bit deeper into my character, Leo, when I first would be, there with my parents, I was with them. We didn't have Ruby, and then all of a sudden a hearing sister came in and changed and shifted our dynamics, and they became dependent on her. And that's, a journey that many CODAs go through. And to see that CODA in a deaf family, we also showed that perspective, and that can happen. So I think that this is possible for everything.
And if I could add, there are so many families that happen to have CODAs with all different dynamics, depending on where they live. If it's in a big city, they have more access to interpretation at the hospital or things like that. But the Rossi family lives in a small town, and the hospitals are distant, and they don't have access. And so they use Ruby to communicate. They depend on her. At the doctor's office is a good example, and they become reliant on that. And this story, we've heard so many tales. We have so many friends that have CODAs, and it's that shared experience, that commonality. And so we borrowed aspects into it, like at the doctor's office, or the farting scene,
I knew you'd bring that one up.
There are two things that I think are important. One is I grew up in Chicago in a hearing family as being the only hearing person, the only deaf person in the family. And I had a lot of deaf friends. Most of them came from hearing families. And we had similar, that was where we had a common experience. But one of our friends who came from a deaf family, the entire family was deaf except one family member who was a CODA. And I was fascinated by that family because I look forward to going to that house every Wednesday because they had deaf bowling. And I never had been exposed to that till I met that friend. And I was fascinated where the whole family, the mother is deaf, the father is deaf, the kids are deaf, everybody is deaf like us. And the communication was 100% accessible. I didn't have that experience. They had that experience of being able to communicate. And, there was the CODA son who would come in and interpret. And there were just different aspects of the community. So I got to observe that firsthand, a deaf family with a CODA. As Troye said, there are so many different CODA experiences out there having to deal with that. CODAs who want to help, who want to interpret, or CODAs who want to separate themselves from the community. Remember, and I can't remember what the second thing I wanted to say, the train is gone, sorry.
Right, and also and we also had 3 CODAs working with us as the interpreters on set, and it was so nice for them to be a part of it, and for Emilia to be able to go and talk with them, and Sean and talk with them. So that was also a great addition to the whole aspect.
Also, Heather Rossi, who is interpreting right now, who was one of our interpreters on set and is a CODA herself, and also has the last name Rossi, which is the name of our family. And her father was a fisherman and had a boat that was actually called Deaf Boater, so that the Coast Guard would see the name of the boat and knew that if they ever had to interface or interact with the boat, that there was a deaf captain on board. So I think there was a lot of serendipity around this story, and I think we were very lucky to have Heather on set.
Well, and for Sean, every time there is a story involving disability or deafness, of course, you're not dealing with a monolith, and there's always going to be criticism from the other side. How are you preparing to have those? We're already seeing it on social media, the criticisms about the focus on Emilia's character, that this is not written by a person who is deaf. How are you prepped to handle those criticisms, and how do you look at them?
Yeah, I don't feel like I need to prep to handle the criticism. I'm open to hear it. I think we're all in a state of learning. I came to this project, I was an outsider. I was not a member of the community. And I knew that coming in, and I knew what I didn't know. And so, there was no part of me that was coming in going, this is my vision and I know how this should be done. I came in a state of learning and openness, and my job was to be a conduit and to talk to people and be very open and hear the experience, and then do my best as a storyteller and a filmmaker to capture that experience. So, I knew what I didn't know. And I continue to know what I don't know. I'm being educated every day. And so I would say, I don't want people to be so afraid of getting it wrong that they don't try. And I really feel like my hope is that I'm in a writer's room and people are pitching, hey, let's make this character deaf. Not, oh, I don't really know what that is. It's like, I write on Little America. I'm a co-showrunner on that show. I tell stories about, a Nigerian experience of a guy who comes to Oklahoma and, wants to be a cowboy. And I have to do my research and I have to talk to people in the Nigerian community to understand what that is. And, I think there's two things that need to happen. One, I think artists with disabilities need to be empowered, financed, to tell their own stories. And that's something I'm deeply invested in, as pulling people up and giving them the platform. I have Hollywood access that other people don't have. And so I think we need to open those doors and make sure that those artists are supported to tell their own stories. But also there just needs to be more representation in general. So I'm glad that I made this film, you know what I mean? I'm glad that these 3 characters are on screen. I'm glad that deaf kids who want to be actors can look at these incredible actors and go, oh, I could grow up and do that. So both of those things need to happen at once. And, I don't want, a little bit of the problem with the own voices conversation is like, we need to have as many of these stories out there as we can. We need to be putting, 1.5% of speaking roles are disabled characters. That's insane. There's a quarter of the population in the US has a disability of some sort. So like, we need to be putting these stories out there and we all need to be working together. And I was really lucky to have the deaf collaborators I had, Alexandria Wales and Ann Tomasetti, who've been mentioned several times in this conversation, were my directors of ASL. And they were really my deaf eyes on set, along with these actors, who were going, you know what, that living room furniture is set up wrong. There's no way in hell that a deaf family is putting their couch facing away from the door. So it's like, from production design to the way we filmed, and saying like the frame is too tight, like the actors' signs are not in frame. And that was something we made sure through the entire movie. I didn't want to be in close up where people's hands were cut out of frame. Alexandria, you always see people using SimCom in films, which is when, you speak and sign at the same time. Alexandria and I, she really educated me on how difficult that is to do. It's almost impossible, as Emilia can attest to. And it's not pure ASL, it's signed English. So it's not culturally specific and you're not really showing ASL. So we had to educate our producers and go, you know what? These scenes are going to be pure ASL. Emilia is not going to SimCom. Like, we're not doing it. So, it was really a matter of me being educated and then trying to educate the people around me and having amazing teachers, which I really feel like Daniel, Troye, and Marlee and sort of the CODAs and the other deaf crew members really kept me in check.
It just makes it's so happy for me to hear stuff like that.
Can I also add too?
Yes.
I'd like to add to say that Emilia and the casting of a non-CODA, playing a CODA, I can tell you that I have 4 kids who are CODAs. My husband is hearing. And I can attest to the fact that out of my 4 kids, they don't sign fluently. So it's not necessarily, there are different levels of CODA signing experiences. Some CODAs can be so fluent that you can't even believe that they're hearing. And then there are CODAs who sign, and then there are CODAs who don't sign. So I just wanted to drop that into the picture for those critics who might say, hey, how CODA is she? It's whatever the story it is that you want to tell, whatever fits the parameters of the stories you want to tell, that's what we should focus on. There are many, many stories to tell. It's just not one experience.
Exactly. Well, and I wanted to ask Daniel, because I think the character of Leo is one that I relate to. I'm the only disabled person in my family. Everybody in my family is able-bodied. For you, that character's quest for autonomy and wanting to assert his independence. Was Leo a character that you could relate to?
Yes, absolutely. I can definitely relate to Leo, and as his playing his character, I felt strongly related to that role. And in my personal life, Leo really wanted to be independent, and he really wanted to have his own small fishing business. And he understood that they were different and looked at the deaf family, and he was really frustrated that they couldn't break away and be dependent on everybody, and they wanted to be independent and have his own business. He saw that they had the skills and the potential to do that, and he saw a better future, and he knew he could bring a part of that. And that's something I can relate to. I definitely know that an independent mindset.
Daniel has great parents. I mean, your two moms have been supportive of your career 100%. So they sign and.
Yeah, right. Yes, yes. I have two moms, and they're both hearing, and they're both fluent in sign, and they've raised me so well. And I am so, so fortunate to have both of these as my parents, who are signing and in the community, and they've given me so much. It's really amazing. I mean, it's 80 or 90% of deaf kids in America, they have parents who don't sign. Can you imagine that their parents love them so much, and that they're just not able to communicate with them in that way, that stunts their growth and their language development. And it's really fortunate that I'm able to have that experience, and that I'm able to have that independence. And I think that's what helped me.
And I want to bring that Emilia did. I'm very proud of what you did, Emilia, in this film. I'm so proud of what you did.
Absolutely.
I totally agree. It was amazing. It was amazing to watch.
And it was so amazing to see your transformation.
I wouldn't have been able to do it without any of you guys, honestly. I'm so grateful, and it was an honor to work with you all. I would sometimes just sit on set, and I wouldn't have any lines for one. I'd just watch you guys, and I'd be in awe. And it made me just want to grow and learn more. And I'm still learning sign language now, because I love it. And I loved working with you guys.
I also wanted to just add, Kristen, that I hope that there are little moments within this story that can spark larger conversations about sort of issues. And while I was not trying to tell every CODA's experience, and I am not trying to tell the story of every deaf family, I'm trying to tell the story of this specific family. But there are moments in the film that I think bring up issues of, finances and economic status being tied to accessibility. This is a family that is really struggling and might not have the same access that a family with money has. I think the issue brought up by the Coast Guard scene, about interfacing between law enforcement often and the deaf community and people in the disability community, who might have, other differences. Like, I think that those are issues that, they're scenes in the movie. It's like the Coast Guard boards the boat and it's this horrible misunderstanding, but that scene is representative of something that happens, a lot of times when police officers interface with deaf people. And so I think it's important that I hope that the film kind of sparks these little conversations that can lead to side conversations and maybe just make people more aware of addressing some of these issues.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Well, I just got the note that we are out of time and we need to wrap it up. I have a million other questions I could ask, but I don't want to keep you guys all day. So I just want to say thank you so much for all of you sitting here with me talking about this amazing film. I hope we get more CODAs in a sense. I want to, as a disabled person, this is the type of movie I want to see more of, not less of. So I'm excited for everybody to get to see it and enjoy it as much as I do. Thank you all so much.
Thank you.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you.
Thank you, Kristen.